Have you ever found yourself struggling in the midst of life thinking, this is not what I had planned or hoped for? Well, then you are not alone, my friend. Life has its ups and downs, no matter how well we thought we planned things out. Welcome to the Redeemed podcast, where we will encourage others through personal experience, even when life does not go the way we planned it. Through various interviews, you will hear amazing stories of lives being transformed, even in impossible situations. My name is Lauren Burns, and I am the host of the Redeemed podcast. Do you know the pain of losing someone close to you way too soon? When grief and loss come from nowhere and it's unexpected, your life can be turned upside down. Maybe it's someone that's older that's been sick for a long time and in and out of the hospitals, and you slowly see them going downhill little by little. Or it could be someone that just in a blink of an eye, they were in your life one day and they were gone the next. That is what I'm going to share today. My sweet sister, at the age of 16, her life was over way too young. This May 2024 will be 2 years since the loss of my sister. One moment, we were all together celebrating my oldest son's 5th grade graduation because, we celebrate graduations, seems like all the time these days. We all joined together to celebrate, and afterwards we went to my house with my husband and I and celebrated with food and cake and balloons, and Chloe was there, and her biological sister, her older sister, Alexis, was there, and my mom, and my son was so excited and so proud, and we just enjoyed the day together. But in an instant, in the blink of an eye, everything changed for my family. One moment we were celebrating, the next moment we were in total turmoil. But God knew. God knew what was coming. He knew the road ahead of us. And He was still there even in that storm. And at the time when things happened, especially things like a 16-year-old losing their life way too soon, it's easy to get mad at God and say, why? And it's hard to answer the questions of how could this happen if God is such a good God? But we live in a world that is not perfect and it is broken. And even the Bible says in this world we will have tribulation, but take heart, I have come to overcome the world. And the Bible says in Psalms 147:3, He heals the brokenhearted, He binds up their wounds. So I had to lean into Jesus during these next few days and weeks and months as my family began to unravel. 3 days after it was an early Sunday morning, and normally I'm up before everybody, but not this occasion. I was asleep and my husband came and sort of shook me gently, and he handed me the phone and he said, Lauren, you've got to take this call. It's your mom. Something bad has happened. All I remember is grabbing the phone and trying to get my eyes to open, and I heard my mom say, Chloe's been in an accident. The ambulance is on the way. It's not good. At that moment, I just jumped up and I grabbed whatever clothes I could find, and I ran out the door, got in my car, threw it in reverse, hit the garage door as I was coming out and made a big bang. My husband and boys walked outside to see what had happened. I realized that I had damaged the garage, but at that moment I didn't care. I just drove off. I didn't know where I was going. My mind was swirling around, and all I can think of is I need people to pray. I began to call and text my friends that I knew would pray. It was early in the morning, so most people were not responding. But my sweet friend Chrissy, she answered the phone. She was actually on vacation, and I told her, I don't know what's about to happen, Chrissy. I don't know what I'm about to see, but I need I need you to pray. I began to pray for protection over myself because I was driving really fast and did not know where I was going. I began to pray over my mom because she was doing the same, and my sister Alexis because she was coming from a different direction. None of us really knew where we were going. We were headed out towards the hill country because that was the information told that Chloe was being taken to a hospital. As I continued to drive and drive and drive and pray, I called my mom. I said, "What hospital?" And she said, "Lauren, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm getting information from Alexis. I don't know where we're going." So I decided to call my stepsister, and she was actually standing in the grocery store that morning, and I told her, "I need you to pray. Chloe's been in a bad accident. I don't know where I'm going. I've I found out that she's supposed to be in a hospital, but I can't drive 100 miles an hour and make these phone calls." My brother-in-law is police chief, and he's got on the phone, and God provides in those moments. And Chris was the calm voice that I needed. He got on the phone and he talked to me. He said, "Lauren, I'm going to call all the hospitals. I'm going to call the police where you're going, and let me find out what to do, and I'll get back to you." So I continue to drive, and a little bit later, he calls me back and he said, "Lauren, no one has Chloe's name in the hospitals, and um, I don't think she's at a hospital. Who's telling you that she's in a hospital?" So I contact my mom again, and it was my younger sister, Alexis. And so I had to call Alexis at this point. And Alexis was hysterical. One of her friends was driving her. And I said, "Who's telling you that Chloe's in a hospital? Can you give me more information?" And as it comes to find out, Chloe had been with her boyfriend, and the boyfriend had contacted his mom, and his mom was on the phone during the whole accident. Chloe had fallen asleep and was driving too fast, driving my dad's old pickup truck, and she fell asleep and she swerved and she flipped the truck um, really high in the air, and it threw across into a field. I didn't know any of that information at the time as I'm driving. I just knew things were going to be bad. So I told Alexis, "I need to talk to an adult. Can you please give me the mom's phone number?" At this point, I thought, I have to pull off the side of the road. I can't make these phone calls and drive not knowing where I'm going. So I pulled over and I dialed that number. And I told the other mom on the phone, "I'm Chloe's older sister. Can you please tell me where she is? I don't know where I'm going." And the first thing she said to me is, "Are you driving?" And I said, "No, I pulled off the side of the road because I don't know where to go." And she said, I don't know how to say this to you." And I said, I need you to tell me what to do. It's okay. I need to know before my mom shows up because none of us really know what's happening." And she began to tell me, "My son was with your sister, holding her hand, praying over her, and telling her over and over again, 'It's okay, Chloe. Jesus is with you. Is with you.'" She had flipped that truck, and her boyfriend was in a car behind her following her and saw the whole thing. He found her. She was still breathing. He was holding her hand and praying over her, so she was not alone. The mom had called the ambulance, and the state troopers and the police were there. And by about the time that they showed up and he could hear the sirens, her boyfriend could hear the sirens in the distance, her my sister's breathing began to slow. And that's about the time she took her last breath. When the police got there, they did CPR on her, but it was already too late. That young man was with Chloe in her last moments, praying over her, holding her hand, and telling her about Jesus. And that sweet mom had to give me the information. So I took a deep breath, asked her to give me the location of where the accident had happened, and I called my my brother-in-law, and he walked me through what I was about to drive up on. I told him what the mother had said, and he still gave me a little bit of hope. He said, Lauren, maybe, possibly, she's wrong. Maybe they took her by ambulance. But when you get there, there should be state troopers. You'll see the car if there was an accident. They will wait for the funeral home to get there if she did happen to pass away at the scene. And in that time, I needed him. I needed Chris to be calm and talk me through everything. I needed someone to guide me. And that's exactly what he did. As I began to drive further and further, I was hitting country roads and I was looking for sirens, looking for wreckage, wasn't quite sure where I was. And I had to reach back out to the mom again. I said, how far down these country roads am I going? And she just reassured me, keep driving, keep driving. So I continued to drive and I saw the state troopers' cars on the side of the road. And everything Chris had said to me is exactly what happened. I pulled over and I got out and I was walking, but then I saw my dad's truck up against a tree and I began to run. All I could do was run. And when I saw the state trooper, he stopped me and put his hand up and said, "Who are you? Why are you here?" And at that point, I fell onto the ground. And all I could say is, "That's my sister. I'm her older sister." And the state trooper with so much compassion said, "Ma'am, we don't want you to be here. I don't want you to go any closer. This is not a place for you to be." And I said, "Please tell me what happened." And he walked me through calmly. And then I told him, "My mom's on the way. I need you to meet my mom at the car. I do not want my mom to have to walk as far as I walked by myself. Can you please meet her?" And within a few moments, my mom's car pulled up and he went over. He met her. And my mom began to cry. And she said, I knew that Chloe was gone. God was just sort of talking to me because we had a long way to drive. It was about an hour drive for us. And she said, God's been talking to me and preparing me. I already know. I'll never forget that. And I can't explain why. There's a lot of things in life that we go through and we don't have the answers. But I do know that God's still good. He still provides. I'll never know maybe what God was protecting Chloe from, but I do know that she knew Jesus. And I do know that I will see her one day in heaven. But until then, I'm going to continue to walk with Jesus and continue to find the good in things and hopefully encourage others to let you know you're not alone in your suffering and your heartache. My sweet son struggled, in that moment. I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. I have all these roles. I'm grieving the loss of my little sister, and I'm worried about my mom and Chloe's older biological sister. But then I have my son that is like, "What do you mean she's gone, Mom? We were just together celebrating my graduation. She's only 16." I knew, like, when grandpa passed away, it was sad, but I was sort of prepared. We saw him, he was sick for a long time. But this is different, Mom. Like, she was here 3 days ago. That means I could lose anyone. That means you could drop me off at school. We could maybe get in a fight, and I might not ever see you again. And so that was the first time I had to see my son process death and the fear that came with that and the anxiety that came with that. And I just had to cover him in prayer and, of course, seek counseling and told him we can't live in fear. You can't stay in this house and sheltered. And be away from everyone because that's not what Chloe would want. She would want you to live your life. And so that was another process that we had to go through as a family. Through that, we were connected with Michelle. Michelle is a grief counselor, and she helped us process through the different stages of grief and to know that it doesn't matter how long it takes for you to go through those stages, or maybe your journey looks different. It's okay that the memories come up and you feel like you're starting all over again. That's normal. It is a process, and it's a different process for each person. So, to honor the memory of Chloe, I want to have Michelle come on today to talk about grief and to help walk us through those different processes of grieving and to know we are not alone in this journey. Welcome, Michelle Ramirez. I am so grateful that she is in my life. Michelle is a grief counselor. She specializes with bereavement, and that is her ministry. She's had years of experience teaching others, walking through hard things. I just want to bring a warm welcome to Michelle and say thank you for being on with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We went to one of your workshops at church. That one time going, you really said a lot of things that were very helpful in our journey of healing. I still hold on to those words 2 years later.
Thank you. Yes, I have led the grief ministry since 2008 at Summit Church. We have a monthly workshop. We'll have holiday workshops and then a 5 week talking support group. As a griever myself, what I found helpful was to be informed and be empowered by what grief was. After my own losses, I had some sudden losses that I experienced as a teenager. We had a child in our family die from cancer, and her diagnosis to death was just months. And I was an adult teen. It was tragic and traumatic experience for me personally, as well as for my family. As a teenager, I also experienced suicide loss of friends and classmates. And I had a friend that also had died in a car wreck. So being confronted with death at such a young age really impacted me. When I was 27, my dad died suddenly. He was 48 years old only. He was very young. He was an amazing father, an amazing friend. I knew at that time that I didn't want to ever not say his name again the way we had done with all the other losses in the
Mm.
past. I wanted to learn healthy ways to grieve. I was studying grief in college. I went to a support group myself. But what I have learned, as a grief professional, I'm not a licensed counselor, but I am trained. I have a master's in human relations and I studied grief counseling. I had experienced it all, and it was tragic, it was traumatic, it was sudden, it was painful.
Yep.
I started studying. I started serving as a volunteer to help others. And then it ended up becoming a career. And I started working as a funeral professional, all the while still supporting my church's grief program. And I say all that because I didn't ask for the role of becoming a grief expert. My journey will never look like anyone else's, but there are some parts of the journey that are common, but our experience will be our own. And I think that's a very important thing that the listeners should know is not to compare their journey with anyone else's, because sometimes we discount our experience and so we don't get support. Obviously, I would never hurt as much as a parent. That's the ultimate pain. But as an 18-year-old that used to babysit my cousin and see her grow up with my own siblings,
Mm-hmm.
it was so heartbreaking to know at 18 that life could be so cruel and an 11-year-old can die. That's the number one thing that I would tell everyone today where you are. Don't discount your pain.
Especially for that young person. My sister Chloe was 16. So her best friends were 16, and for them to lose someone that young, like, my oldest son was like, "Mom, I didn't know I could lose someone that young." It is life-changing. So
Yes.
exactly what you're saying, just because you're not the mother or the sister, you're the closest friend. You're in that friend network, and you lost someone your own age. That's life-changing.
Your world is shattered because you think everything's gonna be great. It shattered my whole belief that there was always a good answer, that there was always an answered prayer. We have to give ourselves permission on this grief journey is to ask questions
Yes.
and not feel shame or guilt for the questions that we ask, because some of the questions are not gonna be easy, and some
Mhm.
of them won't have an answer, and some of them, people will try to answer them for you, and they won't be the right answer.
Right.
We have to be able to ask questions, and in our society, sometimes our faith can be challenged during this time.
Mhm.
I always tell people, pick the things that you know are absolutely true, even when everything else is lost. We can lose our loved ones. We can lose our faith. We can lose our health. But what are things that are true even in those times of loss? When you are grieving, when you and the world seems shattered, how do you survive? What I tell people is to find 3 things that you know to be true. I know that 2 plus 2 will always be 4, and 1 plus 1, it's just the truth. It's always gonna be 2. So,
Mhm.
for me, a truth was that whether I had faith or not, God still loved me.
Mm.
For me, Jesus was truth. He was historically true, he was spiritually true, he was
Mhm.
divinely true. That was comforting to know that. The other thing for me, I knew I couldn't lose what I learned.
Mm.
Got that from my dad as I was grieving him, I wanted to hold on to what he taught me, and
Mhm.
he would teach me, "Whatever you learn, I want you to memorize the Bible because if you're ever trapped anywhere, you can replay it in your head. Learn a song, and you'll never
Yes,
forget it because you can replay it."
yes.
The other thing that I knew I could not lose was what I did for others. If I shared love with someone, even if they rejected it, when
Mm.
you do an act of kindness, the blessing it gives to someone else, no one can take that away.
For me, the hard things I've gone through, if I can share my story and the heartache I've gone through and it blesses someone else, I'm like, that hard stuff is a little less hard if I can help somebody else. And yes, that's what you did for me. And another thing you said, yes, you believe in Jesus, but in those hard times, I step away a little bit. How can you be a good God if you let a
Yes.
16-year-old? And what I've learned is God's a big God and he's got big shoulders. He already knows I'm mad. He already
Yes.
knows that I'm hurt. So it's
Yes.
okay for me to tell him. It's okay for me to argue with him because he already knows me. So it's okay to say those things and let God wrestle with you through it.
It is. And I think that's part of the grief journey is being honest during that time. And I've
Mm.
had some people say, I was never angry at God. And I would always say, I'm not angry with God. And everyone would tell me, you just got to let his will be done. It was his will. And people would say things not intending to hurt, but they
It
just
hurts.
don't know what to say.
Really God's will? Is it really God's will for a 16-year-old to die? I don't
No,
think so.
I don't think
And
so either.
the other saying, God never gives you too much than you can handle.
Yeah.
I don't think that's accurate either. Because I've gone through some real hard stuff in my life, and guess what? I couldn't handle it. So I was on my knees saying, God, I need you. I cannot do this.
Yes. They just don't know what to say. And so the scriptures were written for us to be personal. Um, when I read them, I always ask God, what does this mean for me? And then how do it may mean something different to them. I think when we're grieving, we have to protect ourselves too, because we're very vulnerable and desperate for relief from this pain and heartbreak. And so sometimes we could see something that isn't really there or really isn't true,
Mhm.
but we want it to be. And so we have to be very careful. But you have to make a choice of what you want to seek.
Mhm.
If you want to seek a quick fix, you're going to find a quick fix during grief.
That's what I was about to ask you. What about the people that are just numbing the pain and that quick fix? If it's alcohol, if it's a relationship, if it's drugs, if it's whatever to numb the pain, how do you get out of that?
That's a really hard one to get out of once you're in it and you're addicted. And it's normal to want to numb. How many times do we grab a Tylenol or Motrin
Mhm,
whenever we have a headache or we have a body ache, a toothache? We want to get out of pain.
mhm,
When we're grieving, there's not a numbing. And so there's ways to help us manage it, but there's not a numbing agent.
mm.
There's things that can help us avoid it, even in a healthy way, maybe for a season, because sometimes we have to go to work. So
Yes.
we have to take care of children. So we can't experience the pain in that moment. We have to put it aside. But our intention should never be to put it aside for good. It should just be for
Mhm,
a season till we can get to give it attention. Make a decision early on and say, I will only choose healthy ways
mm,
of coping with my grief. Now, let me give you a definition of healthy and unhealthy because for some people, they may be like, "Well, a glass of wine is not unhealthy." And it isn't. But maybe a bottle of wine, and
right,
then you
yeah,
start having another bottle because it's like, wow, this really did take my mind off of it. We're going to want to feel relief, and that will sometimes cause us to make unhealthy decisions.
mhm. Choosing the people that you're putting in your life, healthy versus unhealthy, for especially people that maybe are introvert and they never reach out for help or they never want to open that part of them, how do they open up and find a safe person or safe place? If it's, let's say they don't go to church, what's the first steps for that person?
Find a group with a loss, a similar loss,
Yeah.
also that has a proven track record. If we go to a restaurant, what do? We check and see if there's any bad comments, right? But we don't do that with our mental health or with our grief support. I know sometimes some people barely come to start dealing with it 20 years because
Mm,
they've been numbing it, medicating it, or processing it in an unhealthy way. So I don't judge a parent that needs to be in support for 25 years. I don't. But I do believe that there should be a level of healing and a
mhm,
level of resilience that you can gain from a healthy support group.
mhm.
And
Well,
I
and
believe
Michelle,
you
you said something else for the person that maybe it's taken them 10 years, 15 years to get to the point to get help. I think that's something for the listener to think about today. Do you want to be that person
yes,
where you're holding on to this for 10, 15, 20 years by yourself? Or do you want to overcome that fear and seek help? Do you want to continue numbing whatever that looks like? And there's something else you said too is like for me personally, I still remember having to go back into work after preparing a funeral for my 16-year-old sister and walking through that. And I'm a physical therapist, so I work with people. I couldn't sit behind a computer and hide. And all my patients knew what was going on and I had to go into work. But it was healing because they cried with me.
mhm.
They prayed with me in the PT clinic. They walked through with me, and every day work got a little bit better, but the first day it was hard. So for the student listening that they're like, "How do I continue on with my education? I put that all on hold. My whole life's been on hold." How long are you gonna let your life be on hold?
It is true. And I can honestly say it took at least 2 decades for me to address some losses in my life.
Mm,
I was 18 when that had happened, when she had died. I started learning about trauma and the impact on us. And so that trauma experience, separate from the grief,
mm,
didn't allow me to love her or to remember her or to honor her because every time I would say her name, all I could think about is how she died. And
mm,
I would relive it over and over. That's when I learned that was a very traumatic experience. And
mm,
I was reliving trauma over and over. And That is sometimes why people avoid, because
That
they
makes sense.
cannot get past
Yeah.
that trauma. It's easier to just say, "Okay, I'm just gonna shut it off." When they can't on their own will shut it off, they'll sometimes turn to substance, turn to
Mm.
unhealthy behaviors, turn to addictive behaviors. In situations like that, it takes more than a will. It takes treatment, and it takes help, and it takes learning. I always tell people, it doesn't matter how long the loss is. If you cannot say their name without experiencing and reliving the traumatic aspect of it, you need someone trained to help you, because there is life after trauma. I would encourage anyone, it doesn't matter how long it's been. I've had
Mhm.
people start the grief journey 4 decades later, and they've lived 4 decades in a very unhealthy grieving.
Yeah.
They don't even know what healing looks like. But grief and trauma are separate. So, grief, again, just the definition, there's multiple definitions, but what grief really is, it's our reaction to the death or loss of something. It's an automatic reaction. It's physical, emotional, spiritual, social. No one's going to be able to change how you react, because immediately when a death occurs, your reaction may be physical, and you feel physical pain, you feel headache, you feel stomach ache, you feel physical, physiological symptoms, even though you're not sick.
Mhm.
And the emotions may just be sadness and overwhelming, n- numbing fear, anger. There's just so much emotions that come, and they come automatically. And then the spiritual. The spiritual is, I don't know where you are. God, you're gone. You're not here. And God, I am so alone. I'm so ashamed. I'm so fearful that you're not here. Why did you do this? But it can also be a non religious spirituality, like
Mhm.
the meaning of life, the meaning of death. What happens to my loved one? Where are they now? Are they still living? That is also part of our grieving and loss. All of this at the same time.
Mhm.
Waited a long time in a very unhealthy way. The only way to really heal is to experience it. You have to go through it with someone. You have to go through it alone at times. You have to experience that pain.
You can't
And
just put it in a box and put it away.
if I had found a way to do that, oh my gosh, I'd be a world
Yeah.
savior. But
And Michelle, there was something else that was very helpful whenever I was sitting in your class that day. You talked about the throughout the year, the memories, the triggers, and that's always brought me a little bit of peace. We'll go to a restaurant and I'll think of Chloe, or like her favorite thing was chocolate cake or Victoria's Secret, bright pink and sparkles, or even going to
yeah,
my youngest son's 5th grade graduation this year. Those are triggers for me, but that
yes,
is okay, and that is normal, and that is the process, and it's
it
okay
is.
for me to grieve her again.
Absolutely. I believe, and I've learned, as long as you love, you will grieve. And as long as they could realistically still be living, you will grieve.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
still wish they were here. I wish I could share this with them. So I think it's okay for us to say, I'm going to just embrace this sad day. I'm going to embrace that today's a hard day.
And that's when you know. So I think that's what I'm hearing you some of the takeaways from today is don't numb it and push it away. It's okay to process your grief however long that takes.
Yes,
It's okay if your grief comes up at different times.
yes,
But like you're saying, if you can't say their name, if you can't think about them without moving forward, then it's probably time to get some help and put up
yes,
boundaries. Choose wisely who you're seeking help from.
yes. It is so important. And many times we don't want to admit we need help,
Oh,
you know.
no. Yeah.
And the help could be one class.
Yep,
The
that's
help
right.
could be one grief session.
That's
The help
right.
could just be empowered by understanding this is what I'm going through, or
Mhm.
it could be a long-term thing. And don't be afraid of pain.
Mhm.
Sometimes there has to be pain. I know that there's certain bones, they actually have to break them to heal them, to
Right,
reset them.
that's right.
And again, there's some extremely tragic situations and losses that you will probably live with a heartache, a heartbreak all your life. But it doesn't mean that you can't learn how to be resilient. You can't learn how to make something good come out of something tragic. And you can't learn how to experience joy.
And you
But
can't move on for the things that God's called you to do. God's got a plan and a purpose for each of your lives, and He wants to see you
does.
moving forward.
We have to give ourselves grace. We have to understand that trauma is when the grief is so significant and it's multiplied. It's much more than we can bear. The stress level that it creates is so enormous. We have to understand that trauma is different than grief. You'll experience trauma and grief at the same time. We need support for the trauma, we need support for the grief. No one invites it, but when you experience it, it does affect you in those same areas that grief does: physical, spiritual, social, but at a multiplied capacity.
Mm,
So I always tell everyone, if you had a traumatic loss, please seek support. At least try it. You just never know, because it affects everything. There's a certain traumatic loss protocol, there's certain treatments, and it depends on the type of trauma you experience. In mine, it was some death losses, it was violence outside my home, it was just different losses. And
mhm,
so I needed a specialized professional to provide that type of counseling.
mm,
And I was so much more able to relate to others. I was able to have a better relationships. My relationships became stronger. I had more confidence. I didn't have these interrupting thoughts all the time, and I wasn't afraid all the time. I'm a person with a strong spirituality. I never knew that it was related to trauma,
mm,
and treatment helped with some of those racing thoughts. And
mm.
those, they weren't even fears.
Mhm,
They were thoughts that were interrupting me because of
mhm.
the trauma. And so that's why I tell people, you have to seek help, and you have to seek information, and you have to seek learning and wisdom, and make up your mind.
Maybe if it's not for you, maybe it's for the person you lost. Like, I'm going to choose to be better for
Yes,
the person that passed.
to celebrate their legacy and the
Mhm.
love you have for them. I am choosing to honor my loved one.
In honor of my sister Chloe today, I hope that you learned some new things and felt encouraged, that you're reminded you're not alone in the grief and the loneliness and the difficulties of this world. But I hope that you find hope. You don't have to stay in that grief by yourself. You don't have to stay in that dark place. There are people that are there waiting to help you. Friends, yes, church, but there's great counselors, all kinds of counselors. You don't have to go all the time. Maybe one time is all you need. Maybe once a month is all you need. Who knows? But you're never going to know unless you reach out for help. So I strongly encourage you to reach out, and I will put Michelle's information in the show notes. And just a reminder, scripture verse, Isaiah 43:19. See, I am making a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness. I am making streams in the wasteland. God's making a way in your wilderness, that wilderness season of sadness or trauma or loss. He sees you. He sees you in your grief and your sadness. He can handle it if you're mad at him. You can go to him. He already knows how you feel, so you don't have to hide. And streams in the wasteland. It's not a big old river, easy to find, it's little streams. He is making a new thing in you today. I hope that you're enjoying these episodes on the Redeemed podcast. My goal is to point you to Jesus, to pour encouraging words into your life. If you're enjoying, please hit the subscribe button. And the best thing ever that you could do is to share it with another person. You are my marketing team. Find me on Instagram, LBurnsPT, or Facebook, Lauren Burns Redeemed. And yes, there is a YouTube channel, the Redeemed YouTube channel with Lauren Burns. And thank you for the amazing reviews. Catherine Grisham, thank you for the sweet comments. If you leave a review, I will give you a shout out. So until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day.